Hey, FBC Allen family, just here today to share with you some tips for the husbands and wives in our church. And those of you who are watching who aren't a part of our church, we really believe here at FBC Allen family that a strong marriage makes for strong families, and strong families make for a strong church. And there's all types of families. We have single adult families, we have step families, we have foster and adoptive families, we have all kinds of families. But when we're talking about husbands and wives, we really want to do all we can to help strengthen those. And so during this time when we're all just kind of in uncertain times and kind of going through life differently right now, I just want to make sure that as couples that we continue to focus on the most important relationship in our lives, other than our relationship with the Lord. But that most important relationship in our lives is with our husband or with our wife. So just some quick tips. And what today I wanted to talk about was just some things to think about when you're in conflict. Now, I know we're probably going to be spending a whole lot more time together, and that's good. But it can also be difficult when we're in close quarters with one another. And so a lot of times conflict can arise. And it's not always intentional. Sometimes it's just being in close quarters. Maybe it's misunderstanding. There could be a lot of reasons why a husband and wife might come into conflict. Could be that they're too tired, could be that they're just super stressed because of work stuff that's happening now, stressed because kids are out of school, just a lot of things could happen. And so when we do enter those times of conflict, I just want to make sure that we handle those in the best way possible and do it in a God-honoring way, and do it also in a way that we can honor our spouses. And so 3 quick tips. The first one is this, you just need to understand that you're both different. And that you both operate differently. Sometimes you think differently and you respond to things differently. And so I think one of the worst things that we can do for me as a husband is to assume that my wife is going to see everything the way that I see it and react the same way that I react to things. And we just have to understand that we need to embrace those differences and be able to say, listen, I get it that your fears may be different than my fears, or things that set you off may be a little bit different than set me off, or what's a big deal to her may not be that big of a deal to me. So we need to understand that there's some differences, and we need to acknowledge those differences and validate those differences. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to agree all the time, but we do have to agree to say, listen, what you feel and what I feel, that's both important. So let's come together. Let's understand that we do have our differences, but we need to accept those differences and figure out how we can come together to move forward to deal with this conflict. Another thing that we have to be careful in dealing with conflict is we want to avoid a selfishness. We don't want to. The worst thing that can get into the DNA of a marriage is the word I or the word me, because the minute that you let something come in between you and your spouse is the minute that you start to drift a little bit. And so I know it's hard when you're dealing with conflict, is you want to defend your territory, or you want to defend your opinion, or what you feel like what you're really saying is the right way, or and maybe it is, but I think as a husband and wife, what you need to do is to get those words out of your vocabulary, those I or those me, and really think about we, think about us, what's best for us, what's best for we. And so that does mean that there may be a little bit of sacrifice that's going to have to happen. Luke 9:23 says, deny yourself, take up your cross daily and follow me. And that's a great passage in discipleship, but it's also a great passage in marriage. One of the things that you can think about on a daily basis, hourly basis, minute by minute, is to say, how can I die to myself, and how can I live to be the godly husband or the godly wife that our Savior wants us to be? Because really we want to do what's best for the us in this, and not just for the me. And a last one is, I think when you get into conflict, what tends to happen is you kind of want to pull away from one another, and that's not good. Dr. John Gottman uses a term where he says turn towards one another and not turn away. And so in conflict, you may want to go to your separate corners for a little while, maybe to cool off or to give yourself some time to think. But you want to make sure that you always come back together and address the conflict and deal with it in a healthy manner. It's good that if you're both angry and both really highly emotional, it's probably a good idea to just call a timeout and say, hey, we'll get back to this, but make sure you get back to it. And that'll help you to deal with it. And you don't want to argue when you're emotional, because a lot of times what will happen is when you're emotional, you're not gonna be thinking, you're just gonna be reacting. So you'll say a lot of things that might be hurtful, and things that you really didn't mean, and things you didn't really think through. So it's okay to take a time out. It's okay to kind of come back to it, but make sure that you do come back to it. And we're gonna be online here sharing some other things with you throughout these next few days, next few weeks. And so just check back periodically. Feel free to share these with people on Facebook or YouTube or wherever your social platform is. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those, and we'll get to those, and we'll try to address each one of those. Thanks for being with us, and take care of your marriage.